I'm joined now by Maryland Democratic Congressman Glenn Ivey, who represents the 4th District of the Free State and was there today when Kilmar Abrego Garcia turned himself in. Good to see you again, sir. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
As I mentioned, you were there today, this morning, at this incredible rally that was held really as the sun was coming up, and there were hundreds of people that appeared outside that facility in support of him and his family. How were they? How's his family dealing with this incredible legal and logistical whiplash that he's now facing?
Well, it's a really tough scenario for sure. I think his family, his wife in particular, is carrying a very heavy load. You know, when they bring the weight of the Department of Justice down on an individual, it can be really crushing, and especially in a scenario like this, because it was pretty much out of the blue for him and his family.
What, in your view, is wrong or illegal about his potential deportation to Uganda?
Well, the Supreme Court said he should get a day in court. And the Department of Justice, the Trump administration, seemed scared to give him one. So when he was initially sent overseas to El Salvador, they didn't want to bring him back, said they couldn't. The Supreme Court said you got to bring him back. Fourth Circuit did too. Eventually they did, but they did it under the guise of charging him with federal crimes. Then they brought him back. He was brought to Tennessee. The judge there looked at the case and said, I don't know that, you know, this is what you're saying it is. I'm going to let him go home, and I'm going to, allow him to stay there until we have the next proceedings here in Tennessee. So that judge looked and said, I don't think he's a threat to the public. I don't think he's a risk, there's a risk of flight. And that's what they've gotten the Trump administration, Department of Justice, whenever they've gone to court. They've been losing over and over again. So I think this pressure to try and send him to Uganda instead of letting him go forward with his trial reflects the fact that they're concerned they might get embarrassed if they go to trial in this case.
I know you were there today. I know you had attempted to meet with him when he was in El Salvador. I know Senator Chris Van Hollen did as well. Is there anything more members of Congress can be doing to fight for him with their congressional powers other than public appearances and speaking out? Is there something you can do to compel the Justice Department or ICE?
Well, not without Republican support. I mean, what Congress ought to be doing is making sure, for example, that the contracts that the Trump administration is agreeing to with El Salvador and apparently Uganda now to jail people out of the United States with U.S. tax dollars, make sure we're using that money in the right way, and these are the conditions that we should be using. Congress should also be looking at the billions of dollars that we're spending on the enforcement of these immigration laws. This Alligator or Alcatraz place and the one they're talking about in Texas, I think both of them are around $45 billion when you add them up. But also, and more importantly, I would say, the constitutional issues here. They're sending people overseas to jails that haven't committed a crime here, there, or anyplace else for indefinite detention in some of the most dangerous jails in the country or in the world. So I think it's a real missed moment by Congress, Republicans in Congress on the House and the Senate, and we're having to rely on the courts to make sure that there's, to some degree, the rule of law is being followed.
Do you compel Republicans when they come back next week to join the cause and say, at least let's check in on the spending?
Well, they've been reluctant to do that. They focus on moving the H.R. 1. They call it the big, beautiful bill. We think it's an ugly bill.
Right.
And, the $1 trillion in tax cut and taxes that are taken away from people who had Medicaid so they can give it to people who, frankly, don't need it. The $3 to $5 billion transfer to upper-income people. They're focused on that.
Let's talk about crime for a second. Obviously, there's this ongoing federal takeover of D.C., and now the president's talking about possibly doing the same thing up in Baltimore, across Maryland, raising questions about the governor, Wes Moore's stewardship of the Free State. What do you make of the ongoing takeover here? And is there anything from the federal government that Maryland could use to help fight crime?
Sure, and they've been doing it already. I was a federal prosecutor here in D.C. for 4 years in the 90s, and then I was elected for 2 terms in Prince George's County as a state DA. And we used teams together. We worked together with the feds all the time. Not the military, because they don't have the tools or the training to help with law enforcement and the weaponry that they carry. I saw them I was on the wharf last night. They're carrying, semi-automatic handguns and assault weapons. And that's not what you need for civil law enforcement. They're not trained to make arrests. They're not trained to Mirandize witnesses. They're not trained in the chain of custody. They don't know about the force continuum. They don't know anything they're supposed to be doing in these kinds of cases. So they're just getting in the way and spending a lot of money. I think the governor of Maryland said it was $1 million a day.
Sounds like.
So, you know, why don't we actually bring in people, FBI, DEA, marshals, other types of law enforcement, people who are actually trained in these sorts of things, team them up with local law enforcement. So you're expanding the resources that you've got to go after these issues, which is what we frequently do. Spend the money on that. And then in addition, enforcement alone is never the answer. You need intervention prevention programs. The reason crime's been going down in a lot of these cities like DC and Baltimore is because the Biden administration had programs like that, especially focusing on getting guns off the street. These guys are totally silent, even on ghost guns that only lawbreakers want to have ghost guns on the street. But there's zero Republican co-sponsors for legislation to ban ghost guns.
But what I hear you saying is federal help from Maryland is fine.
Sure.
Just not of the military variety.
No, yeah, that's right.
Okay. Congressman Glenn Ivey, good to see you. I know you've had a long day.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you stopping by.
Appreciate it.
And we'll see you again soon.